Hi, my name is Jocelyn Hurley, and this is week 6 of the public law videos, and this week's theme was to discuss what we learned in the last 2 weeks of chapters. And so chapter 5 was about the presidency and all of the enumerated powers, implied powers, and like things about the president. So one thing that was interesting is whether or not your Democratic popular vote actually counts when it comes to picking the president, because we have the Electoral College. And I personally think it is helpful to an extent, because I think 33 states, like, their Electoral College representative has to side with the popular vote, which I think is really good because, I mean, we're in a democratic republic. We should be allowed to have our popular vote matter. It shouldn't just be up to the Electoral College. But I also think because of the Electoral College, if you have a faithless elector who just will pick whoever they want, or if they've got ulterior motives, like, then your vote doesn't matter because your state has already been decided who it's voting for. Another thing that I thought was interesting that we discussed was the 3/5 clause. This was put in place as a compromise between the North and the South. The southern states wanted enslaved people to count towards their population because then they could get more electors and have more of a say when it comes to the president. But the northern states said, no, they don't count as people, they count as property. So they came to this compromise that an enslaved person will count as 3/5 of a person, which I don't understand how that works math-wise, but I just find it just very insane. And people don't really talk about that part of history, that the northern states, who were supposedly the freer states, argued that they weren't people. Another thing that's interesting about, like, population and votes is that convicted felons can't vote, but they still count towards the population. And that's why there's more prisons in the southern states, which is pretty interesting. Another thing that was discussed in the chapter was the term limits, because there originally weren't any term limits until 1951 when the 22nd Amendment was put in place. And that said that you can only have 2 terms, which is a total of 8 years, but there's a loophole to get up to 10 because of, like, succession. And also, one loophole that was brought up in class that was interesting is that the VP can run as president the next time, and there's nothing that says the current president can't be the next vice president. So I just think that loophole is interesting, and looking towards the future based off of certain comments by the current administration, I'm wondering if we'll see a manipulation of the 22nd Amendment. Another thing that's interesting is pardons. So the definition of a pardon is that they erase the conviction completely, like all the legal consequences of that crime. And what's interesting about these is that the president can put, like, certain limits to them. Like, yes, like, your thing is erased, but you have to do X, Y, and Z. Or it's erased well, I believe pardons, like, stop, like, I don't know what I'm trying to say anymore. Never mind. What's interesting about pardons is that you lose your 5th Amendment right. For example, like, if you kidnap someone and you're about to go to prison for it, the state governor can pardon you and say, and, like, erase the conviction completely and the jail time, but they can say, we want you to testify and tell us where the victims that you kidnapped are. Like, because they think it outweighs the kidnapper being in prison, which I think that's interesting, that, like, there's wiggle room in it. Next we covered chapter 6, which was administrative agencies, and I like that these two are back to back because administrative agencies really work with the executive branch, and people call administrative agencies, like, the 4th branch of government. They are a counter-majoritarian institution, which means we don't directly vote for them. The president will put them in place, all the executive heads, and there's 2 different types of agencies, independent versus executive. Executive work directly for the president. They will usually do things for the president, and then independent works on their own. They're independent. But the president can still manipulate and influence independent agencies by cutting funding or firing lower employees, and also not publishing regulations, which I think is interesting because regulations, they have to have a notice and comment period. So I'm wondering how that works. So that's all I have for this week. Yeah, thank you.